Lighthouses stand tall along the coastlines, their beacons of light guiding ships through treacherous waters. But beneath their steady glow, they often conceal dark, eerie secrets. These towering structures, once symbols of safety, are now home to disturbing tales that haunt the windswept shores. Here, we present 3 terrifying true stories from the depths of lighthouse lore. Stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat, wondering if the light will ever shine again. The East Bay Lighthouse had been standing for over a century, its light casting a warm glow over the rocky shore for ships sailing through foggy nights. For years, it had been tended to by a solitary keeper, Thomas Carter, who was known for his dedication and love for the sea. However, one stormy evening, Thomas disappeared. His last entry in the lighthouse log read simply, "The storm is unlike any I've seen. The wind is howling like a beast." The next morning, when the storm had cleared, Thomas was nowhere to be found. Searches were conducted, but there was no sign of him, no trace, no clues, just an empty lighthouse. The locals believed that the storm had claimed him, but some suspected foul play. Days turned into weeks, and the mystery of his disappearance deepened. Then, strange things began happening. Fishermen reported hearing the sound of footsteps in the lighthouse at night, the beam of light moving across the water as if someone was operating it. But when they visited the lighthouse, it was always empty. One evening, a local named Jack decided to investigate. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and his courage, he made his way to the lighthouse. As he climbed the creaking stairs to the lantern room, he felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The air was thick with the smell of saltwater and old wood. When Jack reached the top, he saw something that froze his blood. Standing by the window, staring out at the crashing waves, was the silhouette of a man. The figure didn't move, its eyes fixed on the horizon. Jack called out, but there was no response. Terrified, Jack approached slowly, but as he reached the figure, it dissolved into the air like mist, leaving only a chill in its place. Jack bolted out of the lighthouse, his heart pounding in his chest. The next day, he returned with a team of men, but there was no sign of the figure. Only the faint smell of saltwater remained, and the lighthouse beacon continued to shine. Jack left the lighthouse that day, but the image of the mysterious figure lingered in his mind. To this day, the lighthouse stands empty, but at night, the light still moves across the water, and some swear they can hear the faint sound of footsteps echoing inside. Moral: some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved, chasing them only leads to more darkness. The Black Rock Lighthouse was built on a jagged cliff, surrounded by storm-tossed seas. The lighthouse keeper, Henry Wilkes, had been stationed there for years, and his life had always been uneventful, until the night he heard the singing. It began softly, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. Henry first thought it was the sound of the waves crashing against the rocks. But as the days passed, the melody grew clearer, so clear that it was unmistakable. It was a woman's voice, haunting and beautiful, calling to him from the sea. At first, Henry thought it was a figment of his imagination. But when the singing persisted night after night, he became obsessed. He would stand at the window, staring out into the dark, hoping to catch a glimpse of the singer. One night, during a particularly fierce storm, the voice became louder, almost frantic, calling Henry's name. Unable to resist the lure of the voice, he grabbed his coat and made his way down the lighthouse stairs, out onto the rocky shore. The storm was raging, the waves crashing violently against the cliffs. But the voice seemed to come from the sea itself, guiding him forward. Henry waded into the water, drawn by an irresistible force. As he trudged deeper into the waves, he saw something that made his blood run cold. In the distance, just below the surface, he saw the pale face of a woman, her eyes wide with a hollow, inhuman stare. Her mouth moved, still singing, but now the words were distorted, warped into something unintelligible. Suddenly, the sea seemed to rise up, pulling him under. Henry struggled, but the water was too strong, and he felt cold fingers wrap around his legs. The last thing he saw was the woman's face, now twisted in a grotesque grin, before the darkness consumed him. The next morning, Henry's body was found on the shore, his eyes wide open, his expression one of terror. His death was ruled an accident, but the locals knew the truth. The singing had been the call of a siren, luring him to his death. Now, on stormy nights, those who visit Black Rock Lighthouse claim to hear the soft, eerie singing of a woman's voice drifting from the sea. Moral: some calls are not meant to be answered, the cost of curiosity is often too great. The Bell Tower Lighthouse stood tall against the wild winds of the northern coast. For decades, it had been tended to by a man named Samuel Gray, who was known for his strict routine and dedication to his job. Samuel's life was solitary, but he didn't mind. He was content with his duties, ensuring the lighthouse was always operational, come rain or shine. But there was one thing Samuel always did that no one else ever understood. Every night, after lighting the beacon, he would walk down to the edge of the cliff and stare out at the vast ocean. It was a ritual, one he refused to explain to anyone. One evening, as a thick fog rolled in from the sea, a strange feeling settled over the lighthouse. Samuel went through his usual routine, but this night, the air felt different. Heavy with an unexplainable tension. As he walked to the cliff's edge, he saw something that stopped him dead in his tracks. A figure was standing in the fog, just at the edge of the rocks. The figure was dressed in an old-fashioned coat, its features obscured by the mist. Samuel called out, but the figure didn't respond. Slowly, it began to move toward him, stepping through the fog as though it were part of it. Fear gripped Samuel's heart. He took a step back, but the figure followed, growing closer with each passing moment. Suddenly, the figure stopped and raised its hand, pointing toward the sea. Samuel's eyes widened in horror as he followed the figure's gaze. There, just below the waves, he saw the twisted, gnarled remains of a shipwreck, its hull broken and twisted. He remembered the tales of a ship that had gone missing in these waters decades ago, a ship carrying a treasure that was never recovered. The figure began to speak, its voice low and mournful. "The treasure is buried beneath the waves, Keeper. You promised to keep the light burning for those who lost their way. Will you fulfill your vow?" Samuel didn't know what to say. He tried to back away, but his legs wouldn't move. The figure reached out, its fingers cold as death, and placed a hand on his shoulder. With a gasp, Samuel awoke in his bed, drenched in sweat. But the lighthouse had never felt so cold. The next morning, when the fog had lifted, Samuel was nowhere to be found. They say that on foggy nights, Samuel's spirit still walks the cliffs, waiting for someone to fulfill the vow he made so many years ago. Moral: every promise carries a heavy burden, and some debts are paid in ways we cannot understand. The sea may seem calm and inviting, but behind every wave lies a secret, a forgotten soul, or an unsolved mystery. The lighthouses, once symbols of safety, now stand as silent witnesses to the horrors that lurk just beyond the light. And as long as they stand, the whispers from the past will continue to call, reaching out to those who dare listen. Will you be the next to answer?